Hi, my name is Bruno Sade from brunosade.com, and today I want to follow up on my latest video about the optimal activation zone that stated this idea that for EFT to be the most effective, the temperature of the soup that of that which we are focusing on has to be neither too cold, neither too hot. In other words, we have to be tuned in enough to what we are feeling so that the neural and energy pathways connected to that which we are tapping on can be activated, right? So for example, let's say that I want to tap on my fear of public speaking. Then I have to come up in my mind with some sort of specific scenario, like something that happened in the past, something that might happen in the future, that evokes some kind of unpleasant emotional reaction, because EFT doesn't work on thoughts or memories. It works on our reactions to certain thoughts or memories or future events, future made-up events. So in that sense, when we, if I think about something specific that evokes an unpleasant emotional reaction, that and I tune into how I'm feeling in my body when I think about that, that means that I'm tuned in and I am activating those neural or energy pathways connected to the issue. And that's probably when EFT is going to be most effective. So that was like the gist of my latest video. And someone asked me, like, how can we tell when we are working with someone, with a client, how can we tell that those pathways are being activated? So today I want to talk about that. And there are different signs that we can notice. Some of them happen before we begin tapping, before we start any tapping round. Some others can take place during the tapping round, and there are some others that we can notice after the tapping round. So before the tapping round, the easiest sign to notice is like when we say, let's say we are having a session with someone who wants to work on their fear of public speaking, and we come up with a specific scenario, like maybe something that happened recently or something that might happen in the future, an upcoming presentation they have to do. And we say, so as you think about this, this upcoming presentation that you're gonna, this speech, or actually, let's say they have to make a toast because their best friend is getting married. And so as you think about speaking in front of, your friends and family or his friends and family, what feeling, emotion, or sensation do you notice coming up for you now? And so if the client responds like, yes, so right now I am feeling this, nervousness. And do you feel it anywhere in your body? Yes, I feel it in my chest. So there is something that they are feeling right now. So there's an emotional reaction they are feeling right now as they think about that. Then that means that those pathways are probably being activated. Likewise, if as you ask them these questions, you notice that maybe their eyes become a bit teary, or their voice cracks a bit, or you notice, like this sort of like spontaneous expressions of emotions, like even like, for example, swearing, like this freaking person is going to be there, judging me. There's something there that shows that they are feeling some kind of emotion. And so that's also can be a sign that those pathways are being activated. Now, once you start tapping, what you might also notice is that, for example, again, like if someone becomes teary or starts crying, or for example, let's say that you are doing you are tapping on the side of the hand on a statement that the both of you came up with before, such as, for example, even though just imagining that I'm going to be making this presentation, this toast in front of my best friends and family, my mind might go blank and I won't know, I won't know what to say. I feel this nervousness, I feel this panic in my chest, for example, and I still accept what I feel. And as you are having him or her, your client, as you're having them repeat this statement, then suddenly they add like there's like a last minute thought or statement that comes to their minds. I always encourage my clients to interrupt me, or like if something comes in or something comes up, like to just let me know and we can add it to the round. And so it's like, yeah, so even though as I imagine my mind goes blank, and it's going to be so humiliating. And like that phrase wasn't there before when we were talking or coming up with a setup statement. And now suddenly they have, and it's going to be so humiliating. And so that also points out that this like spontaneous thought or statement that came up also tends to point out that those pathways are being activated, and it's almost like the next layer of the onion. And also during the tapping round, when the client starts, for example, yawning or laughing or burping or belching, these tend to be signs of emotional release. And for there to be emotional release, it probably means that first those pathways were activated in the first place. So, for example, myself as a client, the yawning tends to be a telltale sign that I was able to tune in to something that made me feel some kind of unpleasant emotional reaction, and that the tapping was effective in beginning to reduce that emotional reaction. So these are all signs that you might notice during a tapping round. Now, afterwards, what are some signs that you might notice that the pathways were indeed activated during the round? Well, the first one, the most obvious one, is when the client says that the emotional intensity of whatever aspect you are focusing on, so the panicky feeling, thinking about my mind is going to go blank when making this toast, and it's going to be so humiliating. And now it doesn't feel so panicky anymore. It doesn't feel so high anymore. If you use the numbers like 0 to 10, how high does it feel? Maybe it was an 8, now it's a 4. But even without using numbers, they mentioned that it doesn't feel so intense anymore. So that's the first sign. But also like any kind of shift in aspects, like in the aspect that they are now focusing on, such as now it's not so much about that it's going to be humiliating or that my mind is going to go blank, but what if this joke that I thought for this toast, like what if it doesn't land, and like there's silence and crickets, and I feel bad about that. So it's a different aspect. Or even like a shift in perception, like they are now perceiving this situation, this event in a different way. Like maybe even there was like some kind of metaphor, like, maybe before it was like, I'm gonna be like a deer in the headlights, and now the image is more like I no longer have that sense or that image of a deer in the headlights. Now I'm thinking more of maybe a deer that is able to to walk away from the car or whatever. Like any kind of perception that maybe signals like, okay, this is the next layer of the onion. Like now I'm not thinking so much about how humiliating it's going to be when my mind goes blank, but I'm thinking about this other aspect, like maybe the joke will land, nobody will laugh at my jokes, or maybe it's like a cognitive shift. In other words, a cognitive shift is like an empowering shift in perspective. Like the way they are thinking about this event is more positive or more empowering. Such as, well, as I even if the speech isn't perfect, I'm still gonna know that I did my best, and I know that my friend will probably appreciate my efforts, especially considering that I tend to have a fear of public speaking. So I know my friend will appreciate my efforts, and it's going to be okay. I'll know that I did my best. So, that's kind of like a thought that tends to be more positive than saying, it's going to be so humiliating. So, this would be all the signs or some of the signs that point out that those neural or energy pathways were activated during the round with your client. And then something else that's worth mentioning is that, as I was thinking about this question that my colleague asked about, how can we know that these pathways were activated? I thought about this book that I read last year called Simplified EFT. by Valerie Lees, where she talks about like two kinds of clients that she calls direct processors or indirect processors, which has to do with the way that we process our emotions. And so what she says is that, EFT works on our physiological reactions, our physical reactions, emotional reactions to a thought or to a memory or an event. An emotion, at the end of the day, an emotion is something we feel in our bodies, and we put a label like, this is anger, this is sadness, this is nervousness. And so there are some people who have an easier time detecting or naming these bodily responses, and this would be the direct processors. Like, yeah, so as you think about this, this presentation, what feeling, emotion, or sensation do you notice coming up for you? Yeah, so it's panic in my chest. It's kind of they have an easier time coming up with that response. And so she says that in general, as EFT practitioners, it's going to be easier to work with these kinds of clients. And then you have indirect processors, which I can relate more of, as a client myself, which are people that perhaps tend to be a bit more stuck, like in their head bubbles, or like stuck in their head. And like when they get emotional, they have higher thresholds for feeling these emotions in their bodies, these physical responses in their bodies. And so they have to find a way to, to go around or over these thresholds in order to detect these responses. And so, basically this would be people that are more in their heads. And so the challenge for these people when tapping, like whether they are the client or tapping on themselves, is how to how to activate those pathways and how to keep them activated throughout the round. Right? So like without getting distracted. Like if I'm tapping on my fear of public speaking and suddenly start, thinking about this curtain or something else, and it's like I'm no longer tuned in, and therefore the tapping isn't going to be as effective. So, for each person, it might be different. Like there might be different strategies that help each person tune in more to what they are feeling. For example, myself as a client being asked 0 to 10, how are you feeling now? That kind of like just makes me go into my head. Or if I say, I feel this, oh no feeling in my throat because, I don't know, like this, oh no, like, is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it hopelessness? I don't know. It's just like this, oh no feeling in my throat. And if someone asks me, describe that sensation in your throat, like, is it throbbing, pulsating? Is it tight? Is it, constricted? And again, those questions, in my case, personally, they just make me go into my head. So they make it more difficult for me to tune in to what I'm feeling. But other people, when you are tapping, around with them, sometimes for the reminder phrases throughout the round, we might just name the emotion, like, this sadness in my belly, this sadness in my belly, this sadness in my belly. And for some people, they like that doesn't do the trick for them. Like it kind of makes them disconnected from what they're feeling. So for them, it's better to switch the statements on each point, like to say something different, something that still was mentioned in the setup statement, right? So it would be like, my mind's gonna go blank and it's gonna be so humiliating. This panic in my chest, my mind is gonna go blank. It's gonna be so humiliating. So you're kind of like switching it up. Or you might just mention like the most emotionally charged phrase of or statement, connected to the event. So, it's going to be so humiliating. It's going to be so humiliating, so humiliating. Or for some people, it's useful to focus as they are tapping Because, you know, like regardless of what someone says out loud while they are tapping, I think that what matters most is what they are actually focusing on inside, you know, with their minds and with their bodies. Like what are they focusing their attention on? So some people might find it useful in order to keep these pathways connected to the problem activated, to focus on a certain mental image connected to that which we are trying to resolve, or to the event they are tapping on. Other people might find it easier to focus like on a verbal statement, like it's going to be so humiliating, and that word is kind of charged like humiliating. Or like they might find it easier to focus on a physical sensation they're experiencing, like a sensation in their belly, or the panicky feeling in their chest as they are tapping, imagining that they're like at least part of their attention is on this panicky feeling in their chest, or a combination of any of these. So it's, you know, sometimes it's about doing some trial and error until you find what works best for each person. So that's it for today. I hope this video was useful about how to, you know, different ways to notice whether those pathways connected to the problem are being activated or not for, you know, for the clients that we are working with in our sessions. And I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.